It started at a company party in Long Beach. Brio Creative had rented out the rooftop of this sleek, glassy hotel near the waterfront. It was one of those places that always smells like citrus and money. The staff wore earpieces, the lighting was soft and expensive-looking, and there was some ambient synth jazz playing that made everything feel like a networking event disguised as a celebration. I showed up because Bree said it was important. "You don't have to stay long," she'd said. "Just make an appearance, say hi to my team. It'd mean a lot." So I went. I figured an hour or two wouldn't ll me. I got there a little after 6, dressed safe, button-down shirt, slacks, the kind of outfit that says supportive husband without trying too hard. I lingered near the bar, nursing an overpriced whiskey and people watching, while employees milled around with plastic smiles and wine glasses. There were speeches, a slideshow of client wins, a lot of forced applause. I didn't mind. I wasn't there to network. I was just there for Bree. She didn't arrive with me, said she had to stay back and prep with someone from marketing. Fine. But when she did finally walk in 20, maybe 30 minutes after the speeches ended, everything changed. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, and not in the new outfit kind of way. It was emerald green, satin or silk or something that shimmered with every step. Low cut, backless, with a slit that went dangerously high. She looked unreal. Everyone noticed. Conversations dropped as she walked past. Heads turned. Even a few married men glanced too long before catching themselves. I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. Pride, discomfort, confusion. Bree wasn't a showy person. She had style, sure, but she was never one to dress provocatively, especially not at work events. But this night, she was on a different wavelength. She didn't look for me when she walked in. She floated past a few coworkers, offering air kisses and playful compliments, her eyes scanning the room for someone who wasn't me. And then I saw who it was. Zach Mills, Vice President of Development. Tall, confident, a 5 o'clock shadow that probably cost money to maintain. He was the guy she always mentioned in passing, never directly, always with a smirk. "Zach thinks he's God's gift to marketing," she'd say. Or, "Zach's bringing his third date of the week to the strategy dinner." I'd heard his name enough to file him under harmless office ego. Until that moment. She spotted him and walked straight over. He turned to greet her, and whatever joke he made, it worked. She laughed, loudly. Bree placed her hand on his chest for a second too long, and before I could process it, they were making their way to the dance floor. That's when the slow song started. It wasn't an official dancing party. There hadn't been dancing earlier. But someone had dimmed the lights and turned on music with rhythm, and somehow that was their cue. They slipped into each other's orbit like it was planned. And what began as casual movement quickly became something else. I stood at the edge of the room, drink forgotten in my hand, watching them. At first, I told myself it was innocent. Bree loved to dance. So did I, though we hadn't gone out in ages. Maybe she was just having fun. Maybe it was harmless. But then his hand moved lower on her back. Her body leaned in closer to his. Her hips swayed in time with his like they'd done this before. And then she threw her head back in laughter. I felt something twist in my chest. Not quite jealousy. Not yet. More like unease. I'd seen Bree laugh before. At jokes, at friends, at movies. But this laugh? This one looked like flirtation. Like shared history. Like connection. And then someone tapped my shoulder. It was Kelly, one of the new interns. Early 20s, nervous energy, always polite. She glanced around like she didn't want to be seen talking to me, then quietly handed me her phone. "I wasn't sure if I should show you this," she said, voice low. "But you probably deserve to see it." It was a photo, taken maybe a minute earlier. Bree and Zach, mid-dance. Her head tilted back. His eyes locked on her like she was the only person in the room. Their hands were clasped. His fingers were woven between hers. Not how you dance with a colleague. Not even close. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to, then handed it back. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. Kelly gave a sympathetic smile, then drifted away, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't blame her. I stood there for a moment, heart pounding. Then I walked toward the dance floor. They didn't see me coming. I stopped a few feet away, not interrupting, just watching. Bree caught sight of me eventually. Her expression didn't flicker. No guilt, no panic, just a lazy smile, like I'd walked in on her making dinner, not slow dancing with another man at her work event. "Hey, babe," she said, stepping toward me. She kissed my cheek. "You're not mad, are you?" "Should I be?" I asked, my voice calm. She laughed. "God, Tom, it was just a dance." That in turn must have caught the worst possible angle. "Don't let your imagination run wild." "I didn't mention a photo." She blinked, then smiled again. "Well, you looked like you'd seen one." Zach had walked off at that point, melting into the crowd like nothing had happened. Bree stayed close, wrapping her arm around mine like we were high school sweethearts. She leaned into my ear. "Don't be jealous. You know how I get when I drink a little." It was harmless. I didn't respond. Not right away. Something in her tone was off, too smooth, too controlled. Like she wasn't surprised to be confronted. Like she'd rehearsed this in her head. She kept talking. Called the whole thing playful. Said Zach's wife was out of town and he'd been moping around all night. So she danced with him to cheer him up. Said it was no different than dancing with a gay friend at a wedding. She was steering the conversation like a PR rep in crisis mode. Charming, strategic, relentless. And I let her, because in that moment, I didn't have the words for what I felt. All I knew was that something had shifted. The woman beside me, the one I thought I knew inside and out, she'd just shown me a version of herself I didn't recognize. And she did it with a smile. We left the party an hour later. She kept up the act the whole ride home. Laughing, touching my arm, playing music like nothing had happened. When we got inside, she peeled off the green dress and tossed it carelessly over the back of a chair. I stared at it for a long time after she went to bed. I didn't sleep. I kept replaying the way she moved with him, the way he looked at her, the way she covered her tracks so effortlessly. She danced like no one was watching. But someone had been. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was married to a stranger. After the party, everything changed. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, like a knot tightening one thread at a time. Started with her phone. We'd always been the kind of couple who didn't care about things like screen privacy. We used to share playlists, look up recipes on each other's browsers, plug into the car and let Spotify shuffle without a second thought. But now, Bree kept her phone face down. Always. She even started setting it to do not disturb in the evenings. Something she'd never bothered with before. "I just need some quiet," she said one night, when I pointed it out. "You know how work's been." Sure. I knew how work had been. I was there. I saw it on the rooftop in Long Beach. That weekend, I went to add a reminder to our shared calendar. Something we'd used for years to track errands, appointments, plans. But the calendar was gone. Not just blank. Gone. As in, no longer connected. I asked her about it. Bree barely looked up from her laptop. "Oh, that? I think I accidentally removed the sync. I'll fix it." She didn't. 3 days later, I asked again. She sighed like I was pestering her. "Tom, it's not a big deal. I'll reconnect it when I get a second." But she didn't. The weeks went on, and our once intertwined lives were slowly peeling apart like old wallpaper. Then there were the nights, the team dinners, the late client calls, the sudden rush of networking events she'd never once cared about in the 8 years we'd been married. At first, I tried to be supportive. People grow, right? They evolve in their careers. But Bree came home looking more like she'd walked out of a photo shoot than a budget meeting. Flawless hair, red lipstick, perfume I couldn't name. And she always smelled like wine. Not the kind you drink at business functions, but the kind you sip slowly at a candlelit table for two. I remember one night in particular. She came home close to 11:30. I was pretending to be asleep on the couch. She didn't see me watching her from the hallway as she walked in barefoot, heels dangling from her hand, coat off her shoulders. She stopped in front of the hallway mirror and checked herself, adjusted her blouse, ran fingers through her hair, then smiled. Smiled. Not at anything. Just to herself. Like she was reliving something. Something warm. Something private. That image stayed with me. That smile didn't belong to me anymore. And maybe it hadn't for a long time. I started noticing the small things. The tab she closed when I walked behind her at her desk. The way she always left the room to answer her phone, even on weekends. The times she'd say she was running errands but somehow came home without any bags. Or the wrong groceries. I began doing something I never thought I would. I watched her. Not obsessively. Not at first. But enough to notice patterns. Enough to see through the fog. She used to ask me to fill up her gas tank. Now she insisted on doing it herself. Fine. But one night, when she was asleep, I slipped into the garage and placed a tiny piece of masking tape across the seam of her gas cap cover. Barely visible unless you knew it was there. The next morning, she said she was going straight to a team brainstorm session at the office. I didn't mention the tape. That night, the tape was gone. So it was 47 miles from her odometer. I checked twice. She never mentioned going anywhere other than work. But I knew the round-trip distance to her office. I'd made that drive countless times. And this wasn't it. I told myself I wasn't going to spiral. That if I started checking her phone or tracking her car, I'd become someone I didn't recognize. But the thing is, when your gut starts whispering, it doesn't shut up. It doesn't care how much you want to believe the best in someone. I didn't even know what I was looking for half the time. Just signals, inconsistencies, proof I wasn't crazy. One day, I noticed a transaction on our joint account. High-end men's clothing store. One I'd never shopped at. $210. One item. I asked Bree about it casually over breakfast. Oh, that. I bought you a gift, she said with a shrug, pouring herself coffee. But I haven't wrapped it yet, so hands off. I smiled. What is it? She looked at me over her mug. Wouldn't be a surprise if I told you, would it? Weeks passed. No gift appeared. Eventually I stopped asking. But that charge burned into my memory like a scar. Not because of the money, but because of the lie wrapped in charm. Some nights, I would lie awake beside her and wonder how long it had been going on. Whether it was physical. Whether it had started that night on the rooftop or before. Whether it was still happening right now while she was asleep 3 inches from me. Was this the first time she'd done this? Or just the first time I noticed? I stopped bringing things up. Every time I did, I got accused of being paranoid. Bree had a way of making me feel like I was the one unraveling. Like I was seeing ghosts. Do you want me to have no friends? She asked once, when I questioned another late-night team bonding outing. No, I said. I want you to tell me the truth. She scoffed. You really think I'm cheating on you? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Not with any certainty. But the silence between us spoke volumes. We were living in the same house, eating the same food, making the same small talk. But something was rotting beneath the surface. It was in the way she turned away in bed. The way she flinched when I asked where she'd been. The way she no longer asked me about my day. I kept looking for confirmation, not because I didn't already know, but because I needed it to be undeniable. The gut feeling wasn't enough. I wanted to be wrong. I prayed I was. And yet, every new crack in the story only made the truth clearer. One night, she came home late, again, and I asked her gently if we could just talk. Not argue, not accuse, just talk. She glanced at the clock. Now? I just feel like we've been distant. We're just busy, she said. It's not a big deal. Don't make it one. And that was that. I watched her walk upstairs, phone in hand, screen glowing. She used to share things with me. Memes, messages, funny office stories. Now I couldn't tell you what app she was opening. I only knew that when I walked into the room, it disappeared. A few days later, she said she'd be traveling for work. Palo Alto. 2-day conference. Nothing unusual. She packed light, took her laptop, kissed me goodbye like a woman late for a cab. I didn't argue. I didn't ask many questions. I'd stopped expecting real answers. But that night, something in me broke. I opened our bank account. There it was. A hotel charge. Not Palo Alto. Not even close. Oaklight Suites, Carmel by the Sea. It wasn't even subtle. I opened the map on her iPad, one she rarely used and probably forgot was still logged into her iCloud. Her device was there. Right there. Near the coast. Near that same hotel. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove. I didn't know what I'd find, but I knew, finally, I had to stop pretending I didn't already know. The drive from Santa Monica to Carmel felt like one long exhale I'd been holding for months. The first hour, I told myself I might turn around, that I was overreacting, that there could be an explanation. But I didn't turn around. Not once. Instead, I drove north up the 101, headlights carving through patches of fog and radio turned low. I kept glancing at the iPad writing sh*TG*N on the passenger seat. Its battery slowly draining but still locked on Bree's location. The small blue dot hovered less than half a mile from Oaklight Suites. The hotel was real. She was there. The map didn't lie. Neither did my gut. I didn't call her. Didn't text. I just drove. Carmel greeted me with silence. It was almost midnight by the time I reached the sleepy town. The air was sharp and piney. The streets empty except for the occasional glow from a cafe window or a flickering street lamp. The oak light was tucked between cypress trees, perched above the water, the kind of place with retreat in the brochures and jazz in the lobby. I parked down the street, switched off my lights, and waited. For what, I wasn't sure. At 12:47 a.m., I saw her car. It pulled into the lot slowly, like they weren't in any rush to hide. Bree was driving. I recognized her even before the headlights cut off, her posture, the slight lean forward when she parked. The passenger door opened. Zach Mills stepped out. My heart didn't drop. It didn't speed up. It just steadied. Because finally the guessing was over. He walked around to her side, opened her door before she even reached for the handle. She laughed as she got out. Soft, tired, familiar. She handed him something. Maybe her overnight bag. And as he slung it over his shoulder, their hands touched. But they didn't pull apart. They stood there for a second too long. Then they kissed. Not a stolen kiss. Not drunk or impulsive. Just certain. Like it wasn't the first time. Like they already knew how it would feel. She rested her hand on his chest. He smiled. Then, together, they walked toward the entrance of the hotel, past the small fountain with fairy lights tangled in its shrubs. The front desk was empty. They didn't need to check in. They already had a room. I followed at a distance, enough to stay in the shadows but close enough to see the elevator light flash and the doors open. Zach held her waist like he'd done it 100 times. Bree looked relaxed, casual, like she wasn't betraying a single thing. The elevator rose, stopped at the 4th floor. I walked into the lobby once the coast was clear, heart hammering not with rage, but with purpose. There was a fireplace near the entrance and a sleepy clerk who barely looked up as I passed. I didn't stop to talk. Instead, I took the stairs. They were slow, creaky, old school. My knees ached as I climbed. 4th floor. The hallway was quiet, carpeted in a soft gray. I didn't need to knock on doors. I didn't need to listen, because I saw the light. Room 407. The only one with the curtains still open. And for a single second I had a clear view inside. There they were, Bree and Zach, kissing again. She was pulling him toward the bed like it was second nature. I didn't look away. I raised my phone, took a photo, the room number sign, the hallway, then a screenshot *T of the geolocation. And finally the bank transaction, time-stamped, charged, traceable. I wasn't going to confront them. Not tonight. Because this wasn't about catching them in the act anymore. This was about seeing the truth for myself. And never unseeing it again. I walked back down the stairs, out the side exit, and into the freezing coastal air. Back in my car, I sat with the engine off, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Not crying. Not yelling. Just breathing. I stayed there until the iPad finally died. The blue dot frozen in place beside the hotel. I didn't drive home right away. Instead, I pulled off into a rest stop around Big Sur. I watched the ocean from a cliff and waited for the sunrise. It was the first time I had been truly still in weeks. I thought I'd feel broken, shattered, but I didn't. I felt calm. Empty, maybe, but calm. When the sun came up, I turned the car around and headed south, back to the city, back to the house we shared. I didn't know what I'd say to her when she got home. I didn't know if she'd even try to lie again, but something in me had already shifted. The guessing game was over, and now it was my turn to make choices. Back in Santa Monica, the house felt colder than I remembered. I walked through each room slowly, turning on lights, looking at everything like it already belonged to someone else. The framed photo from our wedding, her hand in mine, her eyes squinting from sun and laughter, suddenly felt foreign, like I was looking at strangers. I took it down. One by one, I removed the things that didn't feel honest anymore. Then I opened my laptop, logged into our shared accounts. I revoked her access from everything: email, cloud storage, smart locks, thermostats. I disconnected her phone from the garage opener, changed passwords. I packed a bag, documents, clothes, chargers. I didn't take much, just what I needed to exist somewhere else. Then I wrote a note. No emotion, no anger, just a sentence or two, scribbled in ink that didn't waver. I saw everything. Room 407. Carmel. I'm not waiting around for the explanation. I placed it on the kitchen counter where she'd see it first, right beside the coffee maker. Then I took my bag, locked the door behind me, and left. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Just one person. Leo. An old friend from college. The kind of friend you don't talk to often, but who shows up the second you ask. Come by, he said. No questions. No hesitation. So I drove. By the time I reached his place in Santa Rosa, the sun was high and my body was running on fumes. He opened the door, took one look at me, and didn't say a word, just hugged me and led me inside. There was a spare room, clean sheets, silence. He handed me a glass of water and let me collapse onto the bed. That afternoon, the messages started. First a text. Hey babe, just landed. Everything okay? Then a missed call. Then another text. Why did I get locked out of the calendar? Is something wrong with the Wi-Fi? Later, Tom, I'm getting worried. Please call me. And then, what's going on? Where are you? The final one came just past midnight. I'm home. I saw your note. Please, please don't do this. I can explain everything. I didn't answer. I didn't even open them. I turned off my phone, plugged it into the wall, turned toward the window and let myself breathe in the unfamiliar quiet. And for the first time in months, I slept. Not deeply, but without fear, without knots in my chest, without the weight of wondering. I didn't know what came next, but I knew what was behind me, and I wasn't going back. I woke up late the next morning in Leo's guest room. For a second, I forgot where I was. I just stared at the ceiling, trying to figure out why the light looked different, why the silence felt intentional. Then I remembered everything. Room 407. Her hand in his. The way they kissed, like it wasn't a betrayal, but a reward. It didn't hit me like a punch in the gut anymore. It didn't even sting. What I felt was more subtle. Hollow. Like someone had scooped out the inside of me and left the outline intact. Leo had already gone to work. He left a note by the coffee maker. Take your time. Stay as long as you need. No questions. I stocked the fridge. That kind of friendship doesn't require catch-up talks or explanations. It just exists, waiting. I poured myself a mug of coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my phone in hand, already knowing what was waiting for me. 17 messages, 3 missed calls, 4 voicemails, and one very long email titled, "Please read this before you decide anything." I didn't open any of it. She didn't deserve my attention. Not anymore. I hadn't left room for interpretation. I left the note. I revoked access. I walked away without slamming the door, and that was more grace than she'd given me. But that didn't stop her from trying. By noon, she was escalating. Tom, please just call me. You don't understand. It's not what you think. Then, you're being dramatic. Nothing happened. Not like that. Then, we can fix this if you just talk to me. You're blowing up our whole life over one stupid thing. That was the line that got under my skin. One stupid thing. It wasn't one thing. It wasn't stupid. It was deliberate. And it had been going on for God knows how long. But what cut deeper wasn't even the betrayal. It was the way she still tried to manage the narrative. Like if she said the right words in the right order, she could pull me back into her version of the story. By the afternoon, I went off-grid. I changed my number. I created a new email. I logged out of everything we'd ever shared, our Netflix, our Spotify, even the dog food subscription she always forgot to skip. I stripped it all down. No traces left to link us together. Every account, every digital fingerprint wiped clean. I wasn't just leaving the house. I was removing myself from the version of life she'd written me into. Around sunset, I took a walk. Santa Rosa looked like a different world from where I'd just come. There were redwood trees, dusty sidewalks, hand-painted signs, couples walking dogs, teenagers skateboarding past closed cafes. No one here knew who I was. No one cared. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without pretending. I sat on a park bench and watched the sky shift from gold to purple. And it occurred to me I didn't have to go back. Not in a few days. Not in a few weeks. Maybe not ever. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had options. And more importantly, I had space. Back at Leo's, I finally opened my laptop. I didn't check the messages. I opened a folder marked Documents and clicked on the one thing I knew I needed to see clearly. Our finances. The joint account. The mortgage. The insurance policies. She was still tied to all of it. Still legally tethered to my name. But that wouldn't last long. I printed out statements. Highlighted transactions I didn't recognize. Flagged passwords I'd forgotten we shared. And then I made a checklist. Close joint credit card. Transfer utilities to individual accounts. Remove her from emergency contacts. Find a lawyer. I didn't feel angry as I typed. Just efficient. Mechanical. Like I was packing for a trip I should have taken a long time ago. Around 10 p.m. I got a message from her sister. Hey, Bree's really freaking out. I don't know what happened, but she's been crying for hours. Just, maybe talk to her, please? I stared at the screen for a long time, and then I deleted it. I wasn't interested in Bree's emotional crisis. I wasn't interested in how she was handling it. I knew how I'd handled it alone, watching from a hallway, while she made a second life inside a hotel room with someone else. She could cry for hours. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. That night I slept better. Not great, but better. The next morning, Leo and I sat on the porch, drinking coffee in folding chairs and watching his neighbor's cat destroy a flower bed. You want to talk? He finally asked. I shook my head. Not yet. He nodded like he understood. And then, for the first time in a while, we talked about things that had nothing to do with betrayal. He told me about a project at work, a band he was getting into. I told him about a bird that kept slamming into the window near the guest room. Normal things. Stupid things. Necessary things. That afternoon, I drove around town looking for places to rent. Not an apartment, something smaller. Simpler. I found a listing for a converted workshop just outside city limits. Wood floors, old tools still hanging on the walls, windows that faced the hills. It smelled like sawdust and history. I signed a short lease that same day. No furniture, no fridge, no Wi-Fi. And that was the appeal. I didn't tell Bree. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I didn't post about it. I just moved in. For the first week, I didn't unpack much. I bought a mattress off Craigslist. A small table. One lamp. I worked in silence, sitting cross-legged on the floor, eating gas station sandwiches and building something like a life, one piece at a time. She kept messaging. The tone kept shifting, desperate, then furious, then nostalgic. One morning, I opened a message just to see how far she'd go. It read, I miss your laugh. Remember that camping trip in Big Bear? You got lost for 2 hours and still somehow managed to find the car before me. closed it, deleted it. She wasn't writing to me. She was writing to the version of me that still needed her. And that man was gone. By the end of the week, I got an email from her address, but it wasn't from Bree. It was from her company account. A formal notification. Brio Creative had detected unusual activity related to account security and would be initiating an internal audit. It was brief, vague, but the subtext was clear. Someone found out. I don't know if Zach was the only one. I don't know what was discovered. But I didn't care. Not anymore. I closed the laptop and picked up a piece of scrap wood I'd found behind the shop. I hadn't done any woodworking in years, not since college. I sanded the edges, marked a few cuts, let my hands remember what precision felt like. Felt good. Not healing. Not yet, but close. Later that evening, I got a message from Leo. "How's the monk life?" I replied with a photo of the stool I'd made that afternoon. Crooked legs, uneven seat, wobbly as hell. But it stood on its own. And that felt like enough. The next day I got up early and did it again. This time slower. Straighter lines. Less wobble. I posted a photo online. No caption. Just the piece. A few people liked it. Someone asked if it was for sale. I said yes. By the third week I had orders. And by the end of the month I had peace. Not total. Not permanent. But a quiet kind of peace, the kind that comes when you stop trying to fix something that was never yours to repair. I hadn't spoken to Bree since the day I drove to Carmel, and I planned to keep it that way. Whatever storm she was in now, she'd have to weather it alone. 'Cause I wasn't standing outside anymore, waiting to be let in. I had already walked away, and the further I got, the clearer everything became. The cabin was old and uneven, tucked between a row of pines that looked like they'd been standing there longer than the road that led in. It used to be a workshop. Someone had stained the wood walls with care once, but time had faded them into something softer. Less polished, more honest. No insulation. No central heat. The place smelled like sawdust and cold mornings. It was perfect. I didn't bring much with me. A mattress. Some tools. A backpack with my clothes folded too neatly, like I was trying to feel organized in a life that had just been torn in half. I bought a small second-hand table from a guy down the road, strapped it to the roof of Leo's car, and maneuvered it inside like I was moving into a monastery. It was quiet in a way I hadn't realized I needed. No pinging phones. No dual calendars. No, "Babe, can you grab oat milk?" texts or passive-aggressive Spotify playlists about communication. Just wood, dust, and time. The first week, I barely spoke to anyone. I drank my coffee slowly and watched fog roll through the hills like it was something sacred. I didn't touch my phone. I didn't check Bree's socials, though I knew her accounts were probably full of curated nostalgia. Smiling selfies, inspirational captions, anything to cover the cracks. That world wasn't mine anymore. Instead, I filled the silence with work. Or maybe therapy disguised as work. I found an old pile of reclaimed boards behind the cabin, probably left by the last tenant. Some were split, some still held nails. Others looked like they'd been part of a fence or a barn or maybe a failed idea someone once had and gave up on. I took them inside, cleaned them, sorted by shape and weight, and just stared at them. I hadn't done woodworking since college. Back then, it was a class I took to balance out engineering credits. Just something with structure and sawdust to offset the digital haze. But somewhere along the way, it had become something I loved. I'd forgotten that. Until now. I started small. A stool. It didn't look like much. The legs were uneven. The seat was lopsided. But it held weight, and for the first time in months, so did I. I posted a picture of it online. No caption. Just a photo with afternoon light spilling across the floorboards behind it. 2 hours later, someone messaged me. "Is this for sale?" I stared at the message like it was a foreign language. Then I typed back, "Sure. $50? They paid instantly. Said they loved the honest design. Honest. That word stuck. So I made another one. And then a bench. Then a small side table out of mismatched planks. Every nail driven in felt like I was reclaiming a part of myself I didn't know was missing. My hands remembered the rhythm before my mind did. And as the weeks passed, the messages from Bree slowed. They came in waves at first. Some were angry. "So you're just never going to talk to me again?" Some were soft. "I miss us. Please, Tom." Some were layered in guilt. "I made a mistake, but you're not perfect either." I didn't answer any of them. I didn't block her. I didn't need to. Let her shout into the void if it made her feel better. I wasn't there to hear it. And after a while, the silence became mutual. That was when the real quiet started to settle in. Not the kind that fills the space when someone leaves, but the kind that grows when something new begins. When your mornings aren't built around waiting for an apology that never comes. When you realize you don't need closure from someone who already showed you the truth. I kept building. Soon, someone from a local blog saw my posts and reached out. Said they were doing a feature on makers in the area. I almost said no. The idea of putting my face back into the world felt strange. Too exposed. But something told me to do it anyway. They visited the cabin on a windy Tuesday, took a few photos of me sanding a tabletop, asked gentle questions about my process. I told them the truth. I was rebuilding my life through scrap wood. They laughed. Thought it was a metaphor. But it wasn't. It was literal. By the time the article ran, I had 10 new orders waiting. A woman from Sebastopol wanted a custom bench. A couple from Petaluma asked if I could make matching nightstands. I said yes, even though I wasn't sure how long I'd stay in this cabin. Even though I didn't know if any of this would last. But it gave me something to anchor to. Something that didn't vanish when I closed the door. I hung my tools in neat rows along the wall. Labeled drawers. Swept the floor every night like it mattered. I started going to the local farmer's market on Saturdays, talking to people about things like wood grain and leg angles, and for a few hours each week, I remembered what connection felt like without complication. The nights were still long. Lonely sometimes. But not empty. I had a space heater now. Kettle. A soft blanket I picked up from a roadside thrift store. I'd play music through a tiny speaker, mostly instrumental or old records that reminded me of road trips I used to take before marriage turned into a schedule. One night, as I was gluing joints on a maple chair, a message popped up from Kelly, the intern, the one who had first shown me the photo at the party. It had been months. Her message was short. "I hesitated to send this, but I figured you'd want to know the full truth." Attached was a photo. Bree and Zach, standing in the corner of what looked like an office hallway, holding hands, not posed, not smiling, just still, close, comfortable. His hand wrapped around hers like it belonged there. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking down. He was watching her like she was the only person in the world. There was no context. No timestamp, but it said everything. I stared at it for a long time. Then I downloaded it and printed it out using Leo's old printer the next time I visited. I didn't do it out of spite. I didn't plan to post it or show it to anyone. I folded it carefully and tucked it into a drawer in my cabin. Right between a chisel and a scrap of cherry would I plan to use for a shelf. Not because I needed to keep it, but because one day, I wanted to pull it out and remind myself that it was real, that I wasn't crazy, that I'd seen it all clearly, that the story had happened and that I'd survived it. The next morning, I got up early and took a walk through the woods behind the property. Just trees and dirt and the smell of fog lifting from leaves. I stood at the edge of a ridge and looked out at the valley below. No phone, no signal, just breath. And I realized something. I didn't think about Bree first thing in the morning anymore. I didn't flinch at the thought of her voice. I didn't imagine running into her at a coffee shop or crafting the perfect sentence to say if she ever showed up. I didn't even check if she was still active on social media, because I didn't care. Not in a spiteful way. Not in a bitter, "I hope she's miserable" way. Just in the way that happens when someone finally stops living in your head rent-free. She became background noise. And I became something else entirely. Someone I hadn't been in years. Someone who built things with his hands. Someone who watched the sunrise without wondering who might lie to him before it set. Someone who, slowly, was learning how to be whole again. Weeks later, Kelly sent me a photo. Bree and Zach, holding hands in a hallway, unaware they were being watched. No smiles, just quiet closeness. She said she hesitated to send it but thought I deserved the full truth. I didn't respond. I printed the image, folded it, and tucked it in my drawer. Not out of spite, but so I could look at it one day and remind myself, it really happened. And I was finally free. 6 months later, I had a waitlist for furniture, a growing blog, and peace I hadn't known in years. Bree was fired after an internal review. Zach moved on. I never replied to her last message. At a gallery event, she tried to speak to me. I turned and walked away. No anger, no sadness, just indifference. That was the moment she knew. It wasn't just that I didn't love her anymore. I didn't even notice her. My life had already begged *n, far from the ruins she left behind.